Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to the Engage podcast. My name's James. It's great to be back with you, and as ever, I'm joined by my co-host Peter.
Great to see you, James.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're both in shorts today.
I know. Very summery.
Indeed.
And,
what is the world coming to?
We actually had a discussion prior to filming around what number of buttons should be done up or not undone. Sorry, done up or not done up. That would be appropriate for this podcast. I think we've settled on the right place.
Well, we don't want to lead our viewers into sin, do we?
Oh gosh, this podcast has started in the strangest way. Actually, before we get on to the meat of what we want to discuss, and there's a number of really interesting stories we want to pick up on. We're going to be talking about Tony Blair. Remember him? We're going to be talking about social media and to ban or not to ban. And then we thought it would also be good just to touch on a story that's bubbling in Scotland about Nicola Sturgeon, her former husband, Peter Morrell, and the SNP and missing money. So we'll come on to that later. But before all of that, I just want to give a plug for Engage Live. Now, you've heard me talk about this already, but we thought at the top of this podcast, we would let you know that you can now book your tickets for Engage Live. On Tuesday, the 17th of November, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at St. James the Lesser Church in Pimlico, Westminster location, suitably convenient if you work anywhere around London, fantastic transport links if you work anywhere outside of London. We will be hosting a discussion on the subject of Christian nationalism. Peter and I are hoping that special guests will be joining us. We'll be announcing them in due course. But for just £5, you can book your place. Tickets are already selling. I managed to sign up and book in 5 people myself yesterday. So here we go. Engage Live, 17th November 2026. Book your tickets and go to care.org.uk/engage live. And perhaps what we could do for you is just put that on the screen in front of you for your convenience, and it will be in the description on this video. Anything else to add, Peter?
No, that was an excellent plug.
Oh, it was actually quite exhausting in this heat for me to do that for our people, for our crowds. We're hoping to summon the masses, aren't we?
Absolutely.
It's a massively important topic, though, isn't it?
You've got 5 people signed up and none of them are even from your family. It's fantastic.
No, well, I don't think she's signed up yet, but one of the 5 verbally has assented to coming. I don't know if they've actually signed on the dotted line yet, but one of them is actually my sister.
Oh, okay.
So shout out to my sister. Thank you for agreeing to come.
20% of
20% of our audience are non-family. Yes, our family. That's right. Anyway, it'd be great to have you join us. Now, onwards. So, in this heat, Peter, in this extraordinary heat wave that we've just enjoyed over the bank holiday, here is the ghost. Well, not the ghost, the reality of a former prime minister suddenly telling us that we should scrap net zero. How on earth can we...
I was trying to work out how you were transitioning into that.
So was I, as I was speaking. But no, how can we be talking about scrapping net zero when we've just seen a record temperature for May in this country? Temperatures above 32, 33, 34, I think 0.5 was what it reached, maybe even slightly higher. So let's talk about Tony Blair. Do you like Tony Blair?
I have mixed feelings on Tony Blair. I think that he was a good statesman, an excellent communicator, and I think his time in government was probably the most stable time for our country while I have been alive. And there were various good things which New Labour did. You were about to ask me a question.
Very quickly, so we can paint a bit of a picture. So Tony Blair was first elected as leader.
Yes.
94.
Yes.
How old were you in 94?
Naught.
You're not even been born yet?
I was born in 94.
No, okay, you were born in 94. So
you were 2, right?
I would have been depends which month, but possibly 3. So I was born in 91, and then 97 when he was leader.
So I would have been 3 when he was elected prime minister, and then 13 when he left.
Okay. So kind of the early years when he was prime minister.
Yeah, and of course he was never actually supposed to be leader, was he? Because it was John Smith, I think, who died.
Yes.
And then so I guess there would have been 3 successive election victories won by him. In my lifetime, he was, the prime minister I grew up knowing as prime minister.
Yeah.
And I think New Labour probably did various quite good things.
Yeah.
Equally, as with almost any prime minister today, you are remembered for your big mistake more than anything else. And I mean, I think you've almost seen that with kind of successive prime ministers. So Cameron will only ever be remembered for Brexit. Theresa May will only be ever remembered for failing to get Brexit done. Boris Johnson, I guess you can take your pick on a litany of things. But Blair, I guess, particularly within a certain constituency, would only really ever be remembered today for Iraq.
Yes.
And that you can't skip over someone's failures as well. So I would have mixed feelings. What about you?
Well, similar to you, Peter, I grew up with Tony Blair as Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was at primary school talking about him in discussions about politics.
Yeah.
I remember even more, I think by the time it got to 2007 when he announced he was stepping down, I remember, I was partway through some exams at school, and I remember we talked a lot about politics and modern studies, and my floating voter instincts were already kicking in, I would say, if I'm honest with you, Peter, even then in those early days. And the thing is, I don't remember much about him in terms of specific policies. I remember far more just him being a very stable presence. Like you just were used to him being there and being Prime Minister. And when he left, even 2007, I guess because I wasn't reading all about the ins and outs, it was a bit of a shock. It was like, oh, he's gone. Oh, okay.
Well, I think Blair carried with him a certain gravitas, didn't he? Like when he spoke, you felt like you were listening to a leader.
Yes, I think
in a way in which I don't think you could say the same of our Prime Minister today.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we have reflected in previous podcasts on the importance of communicating well when you are the leader, and how relevant and necessary that is today, even if you should be able to be Prime Minister and not be the world's greatest communicator. You've got to try. You've got to work hard at it. And I think even opponents would concede that Blair has a certain gift for political communication, the ability to make an argument. I remember writing my dissertation on the speeches of Blair and Cameron when they were leaders of the opposition.
Oh, interesting.
And my main conclusion was they both used political speeches to present modernisation. Blair, what was interesting with Blair was he used very explicit Christian language. He talked a lot about covenant. He talked actually at one point around 10 principles, or sort of, mirroring the 10 commandments, not exactly, but sort of kind of. And my ultimate conclusion was both of them were good, but Blair was better. There was just an elan to his speech. He was able to use, really flowery rhetoric that it just read well.
I often think, and this isn't original to me, but Cameron is effectively Blair light, isn't he?
Yes.
In terms of he was trying to ape Blair's success.
Yes.
But Blair was definitely the one who did it better. I guess if we relate this to what's happened, I guess within the last 24 hours as we record this.
Yes.
But, so it is not news, I suspect, to most of our viewers that Labour is not having a great time, and that also that there is effectively a battle for the future direction of the party. We touched on that last time we recorded. So we recorded a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't know if the Prime Minister was going to last the day.
No, I know. I know. That was extraordinary, wasn't it?
It was unfolding quite quickly.
But he's still there, and he's still acting as if he's going to be there for a very long time.
Completely, yes. So I think there are probably three main directions this could go in, even if we could interchange some of the figures who will fit into different routes. Option number one, which I would have said is the least likely option. Keir Starmer refuses to give up the keys to Downing Street.
Yes.
They can't drag him out, and so he limps on and on with no authority. I would have thought, and I think we probably both agree, that his days are numbered.
Yes.
And it is a matter of when rather than if.
Yeah.
Option two would be that Andy Burnham, who is seen as the great hope to revive the fortunes of Labour, wins his by-election. When we were last recording, had he even got a by-election seat? I can't remember.
I think he might have done.
It all unfolded so quickly.
Yes.
But yes, so he's contesting a by-election in Makerfield.
Yeah.
It's not a given that he's going to win because he's up in a close battle with Reform. But if he does win, then the suspicion is he will not take long before he strikes and launches his leadership challenge. And that would generally be seen as taking Labour a bit more towards the left. If Andy Burnham doesn't win, then you're likely to get someone else who will try and do something similar, whether that is an Angela Rayner or an Ed Miliband. But it's most likely to be Andy Burnham if he wins. And then your third option is that you have someone like Wes Streeting, who has made no secret of his ambitions and has said that he will run if there is a contest, who would take the Labour Party probably slightly more towards the centre ground again, although Wes Streeting knows that will not be popular with Labour members, so therefore he's come up with various left-wing things, which he said in the last couple of weeks. So those are the three main options. So that leaves us with, real question marks over what the future of Labour is going to look like. So into this vacuum steps the one person who has won 3 elections for Labour, certainly the only one who's won consecutive election terms for the best part of 100 years.
Something like that, yeah.
So, James, why don't you start off by touching on some of the main things which Blair thinks are wrong with the country before we get on to the solutions.
Yes, okay. Now, I should just say, you've kind of landed me in it here.
Oh, sorry. I actually didn't mean to do that.
No, not at all. Because, of course, Tony Blair, he's not really fond of the kind of, short 800-word articles, which I would have enjoyed reading. Instead, he decides to write a 5,500-word article, which I forced myself to read and got very bored with. I'm going to be honest, I got bored.
Oh,
okay?
I quite enjoyed it.
I thought you would. I thought you'd enjoy it. So, broadly speaking, a couple of big themes I think that Blair identifies. One, so he talks a lot about the fact that at the moment, politics is obsessed with internal politics rather than policies.
Yeah.
And he lays that charge at the door of Labour and at the Tories, who have been in power for the last 14 years. In other words, the parties have looked inward rather than looking at what's happening not just in Britain, but the wider world, and what are we going to do to position Britain in the most effective way so that we can continue to be an internationalist, a global player, so we can strengthen our economy, and so on and so forth. So that's number one.
Okay.
Number two, he says that we're just not talking or engaging enough with the 21st century equivalent of the 19th century industrial revolution.
Yeah.
And this is the rise of AI and the rise of all of that more kind of AI-related technologies. So we're all using ChatGPT now. We're using Copilot if we're on Microsoft. These things are becoming part of daily life. His point is this is going to be a massive disruptor on the jobs market. Companies are going to have to adapt or die, and politicians are just not talking about it enough. That would be the second big theme. Third big theme I see is he thinks that the UK made a misstep when it seems to posit that you have to choose from foreign relations between closer to Europe or close to the United States. He thinks it's got to be both. He is insistent that we remain absolutely in lockstep with the United States. He is saying that the mistake we made, it was a silly mistake, he called it, where we refused to let the US use our air bases when they launched their bombing raids on Iran. Now, that decision was largely reversed subsequently. However, that initial decision to say no has damaged the special relationship. So that would be another big theme. And then finally, if I could pick on one more big theme, for me, it's where he comes back to or ends on his big conclusion. And lo and behold, Tony Blair, the man who famously dragged Labour from the far left to the centre and won 3 elections, still thinks that the centre ground is where Labour can win. And I have some questions around those 4 points. But that would be how I see him, sort of his main diagnosis of hashtag Broken Britain. He does offer solutions. And I must say that there's a lot there that I kind of go, we could get into more specifics. He thinks welfare spending's too high. He thinks net zero it needs to stop. We could get into all of that. But I must say there's not really much that he's written there that I disagree with.
I would have the same assessment, I think. Why don't we dig into one or two of those individual points, because I think there are some quite interesting ones. So why don't we start off by talking about the difference between internal politics and long-term policy solutions? Because I guess, as you touched on, one of the big criticisms which he's got is that the Labour Party does not have a coherent long-term plan. And he relates this, doesn't he, to the leadership contest, and he warns about a world in which who your leader is based more around their personality than around their political vision. Is that something which you agree with?
Yes. 100% I agree with it. Sorry, I mean, there was no surprise. Sorry, I jumped in because I was so excited to say yes. Yes, and this is so important. Think for a moment about Joseph in the Bible, raised up to become prime minister of Egypt, given visions by God to know the future. And what does he do? He's able to spend 7 years building resources so that when the famine comes, Egypt has enough, not just for their own population, but to bless other people coming from other nations. Now, you imagine a leader standing up today and saying, in 7 years' time, this is going to happen, but don't worry, starting today, we're going to start preparing for it. There would be howls of protest because we live in an immediate culture where everyone wants everything now. And I think politics is crippled by this. Think about welfare, for example. The Prime Minister tried a modest welfare reform package. And his MPs kicked up such a fuss. Actually, ironically, that was him trying to do long-term policy, but then he was so beset by internal politics that he had to abandon it completely, one of many, many U-turns. And so I do think Blair's analysis is right. And if you think about our country, you think about National Health Service, you think about social care, you think about military and defence spending, you think about AI, all of these areas require long-term solutions. The fact that you can't get Wi-Fi on trains, which apparently will soon be fixed. I mean, that is another thing that requires proper investment, proper long-term solutions, so that when we're on our trains, we can all credibly work. So I think Blair is exactly right, but our politics is built on short-term immediacy.
I would completely agree with that. I think so. Well, I think he made a very interesting point, actually, when he related it to elections. So he talked about, in the run-up to an election, the Labour Party almost felt obliged to play down its more left-wing instincts and to pretend it was going to govern from the centre. After the election, the Labour Party has realised it can't really govern from the centre, and so therefore it's having to govern from the left because that's how it keeps its current MPs and the membership happy. And then people who voted for it then feel disillusioned. And so in each case, you're almost kind of going from one short-term need to another. It's like, how do I keep the electorate on side? Okay, I'll promise this. How do I keep the MPs on side? Okay, well, I'll backtrack on that, but I'll do this instead. And so I think he's absolutely right when he's talking about there being a lack of a long-term plan and also a lack of decisions which will benefit the whole country as opposed to just kind of quieting down the voices of dissent.
I think, though, one critique would be, is Tony Blair really engaging with politics as it is now, as opposed to politics as it was when he was Prime Minister? Because we talked about this on the last podcast, the increased frequency with which backbench MPs revolt against the government and against the party whips. That just wasn't as big an issue for Tony Blair. You always had your Dennis Skinners, your rebels who you could count on, but you knew who they were. Now it's a lot more fluid, who will rebel and when. And so I'm not sure what I saw and read in that essay was Blair grappling with the sort of insurgency, populist politics of today, and whether that is another dimension that his solution actually wouldn't really work for anymore. I don't know.
I think it's a fair point. There'd be a fascinating podcast sometime if we were to speculate as to why MPs have become like this. I guess one of the things which this links to, I think, is the fourth of your four things which you listed, which is the politics of the radical centre, as he called it.
It's funny what that heavy lifting, that word radical, has to do.
I know. You mean governing the way we always thought we should govern?
That's right.
People sometimes say the politics of the centre ground is dead. Do you agree? I would say that in this analysis, Blair is not really grappling with the rise of reform, a party and the fragmentation of the two-party system. So
governing from the centre, I think, works when you have a strong left-wing party and a strong right-wing party. Both are relatively mainstream, both have their fringes that are more extreme, but both can gravitate toward the centre. What has changed the political landscape is the rise of Reform, the rise of Restore. Reform, who cut both left and right. And all of a sudden, what's the centre ground when a party is proposing, for example, that they're going to be very, very, very tough on immigration, but they're also going to be spending lots and lots and lots over here to sort out the problem of adult social care. And by the way, they're also going to be cutting the civil service quite dramatically. And I think that in that situation, it's much, much more difficult. The word radical was deliberately put there by Blair because what he does clearly recognise is that people want a radical solution.
Yeah,
but
completely.
Radical centre, it's a bit meaningless, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And it's just Blair retreating to his comfort zone where he won. And I'm just not sure, again, that really properly engages with the political landscape of today.
Yeah, the next few years are going to be so fascinating, aren't they? I think your assessment that people, and actually to be fair, Blair recognises this. I think the assessment that people want a solution from people who believe in principles, who have a sort of more bold plan for the country, as opposed to just managerial decline.
Yes.
I think that's a completely fair. I think that's a completely fair point. And Blair does sort of spell out, look, here are the other parties offering radical things. There was a quote which, from relatively early on in the piece, which I thought was quite a helpful quote, where he says, Britain needs radical change, but the difficulty, not just in Britain, is that too often the sensible people aren't radical, and the radical people aren't sensible.
Well, that's brilliant. I mean, that's just brilliant, isn't it?
I mean,
that's vintage Blair.
It is classic Blair. But it kind of does strike at the heart of the difficulty in which we find ourselves.
Yeah.
If you're looking for big, bold pronouncements from people who've never actually had to deliver anything, then, sure, Reform and the Greens will offer you very bold plans. But I must confess, I would echo the assessment that much of what is proposed isn't very sensible.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were chatting in the office yesterday about the internal war in Reform, weren't we? Where you have Robert Jenrick and Zia Youssef as like two major figures within Reform having a public spat on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like that is not the actions of a credible political party.
No,
you
that's
imagine
exactly
what it would be
right.
like in government.
Well, that's exactly right. Yes.
But then the sensible people, as Blair says, often are not radical enough.
Yeah.
And yes, I wonder whether what Blair is really kind of getting at is the sensible people, as he puts them, need to come up with, even if they are trying to govern from a centre ground, they need to have a vision which people get behind, and a long-term goal, and then everything fits within that goal.
Yes.
And so one of the things which he talks about in there, which I thought, again, was quite helpful, was how if you want to prioritise economic growth, as the Labour Party has said it wants to, then you need to actually prioritise it and make other things subservient to it. Yeah. So when he's getting into things like, well, you can't have net zero alongside economic growth, and he didn't call it an act of self-harm, but that is essentially kind of what he was getting at. Or you might need to reduce some of your regulations. So some of this stuff actually... I guess you can sometimes only really look to achieve one main aim, and then other things have to adapt and bend to get there.
Yeah.
And what the Labour Party is currently trying to do is hold various things in tandem, as opposed to having that one coherent big vision.
I mean, I think that's right. I think, Tony Blair is never going to not advocate for the centre ground, is he? I think the other thing, yes, he's advocating for a centre ground in comparison to the current Labour government, and certainly in comparison to, say, Burnham's soft lefty-ism and Corbyn. Yeah. But he's also very, very, very sort of, government is an enabler, not a director. Government should get out of the way. Government should give confidence to the private sector. When it comes to AI, there seems to be a massive, and by the way, the Tony Blair Institute, of course, helps to advise major AI companies. So there is some vested interest there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what he doesn't talk about is what about the regulation that we're going to put in place around AI?
Yep.
And there's nothing about some of the other problems. Now, forgive me for that. This is a Christian podcast, so you'll forgive me if I do this. We have problems in this country around social policies, around proposals around infringement on free speech, the challenge of gospel freedoms. You think about social policies, admittedly, that are conscience issues, but around abortion, around assisted suicide. There's nothing of that in here, nothing at all about the social problems that we're facing, inequality in our country that's so deeply entrenched. It's classic Blair. I think he's in one sense you can't say everything in a 5,500 word essay, but there wasn't, for me, that sense of guiding morality in this essay that I would love to see, especially as a Christian interested in politics. Like, it almost felt like it was just assumed that AI is a good thing, that therefore we need to let it in. There's no warnings, there's no sort of sounding of the alarm. And by the way, I say that not as a Luddite. You know, I use AI and I think it's got tremendous potential. I suppose I just wanted more. And maybe that's unfair of me because this was just one essay, albeit a very long one. But from a Christian perspective, his essay just left me feeling, I suppose, a little bit cold because I think there are these other issues, you know. We could talk about trafficking. We could talk about the Nordic model. Now, these are too minute on one level for this essay, but that is part of what governing involves too. Not just economics, not just industrial revolution stuff, not just foreign relations, but also domestic social contracts, social policies. And I'm not saying he should have come out and said, what we need is to criminalize the purchase of... what I would have wanted to see is some engagement on. That's also part of the problem in our country, is that social area, people feel confused. There's an absence of morality. People don't know which way to turn. And that was missing entirely.
In some ways, I think it's almost a rather sad indictment of where we are as a country.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's very helpful, yeah.
Because I think you're right. He probably would not think that those are big or important issues. Yeah. And then that says something about the way in which our more secular society is approaching government today. Yeah,
I think that's right. It's just a helpful thing, I think, as a Christian approaching an essay like this. As ever, I'm going to see things I can connect with. As ever, I'm going to see things I want to challenge. But I think that Blair at his best, I always felt, could give a sense of clear morality. You know, this is right, this is wrong. And I sort of felt like that was just slightly missing in this essay. I'm not talking about a kind of puritanical thing. I'm not talking about a kind of, list of sins that our country is committing. I'm not expecting that from him, but I just wanted more on that score. And I think as a Christian, then that's always going to be something that I look for, I'm interested in. You know, what's your fundamental view of what it means to be human? How's that shaping, the policy solutions you're bringing to the table?
Yeah, and I guess you can see the contrast, can't you, in terms of the way Blair talks about AI, and then within the same week, we've just had the encyclical from the Pope, haven't we?
Yes, exactly.
Who is raising some of these questions about what does it mean to be human?
Yes.
And how is AI going to help that? Whereas it almost feels like Blair sort of just assumes, he explicitly does. He sort of says, forget whether you think it's a good thing or bad thing. It just is a thing.
Yeah.
And sort of like you've got to accept it and adapt to it.
Exactly. Yeah. And interestingly, the gifs from the Pope's encyclical on social media were very funny, of the Pope, karate chopping robots and that kind of thing. Whereas, if you were to do a gif of Blair's speech, it would be, crowning AI and crowning these robots, welcoming them in, kind of thing. And I don't believe Blair really believes in completely unregulated artificial intelligence.
I'm sure he doesn't.
But I think that the fact that this essay was all directed around, this is a fact. We've just got to get on with it. And even just a line that acknowledged we've also got to do the hard yards now of working out how we're going to regulate this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe I'll write to him. Well, it wouldn't be the first time. Right, so that's Tony Blair.
Yeah.
With his major intervention into the Labour leadership. And I must say, do you think it's right that former prime ministers make such significant interventions? I
guess he doesn't do it very often, does he?
No.
I think one of my big observations is I just don't think the Labour Party... I almost feel like Blair is more in touch with the country than he is with the Labour Party. I think the Labour Party just doesn't care about him anymore.
Yeah.
Because they've written him offers.
Yeah.
Particularly the current Labour MPs would view him as someone who was effectively a red Tory. And so I just don't think they particularly are interested in what he has to say. Whereas they are more interested in Gordon Brown, which you saw when Keir Starmer brought him back a couple of weeks ago.
And there's a good example of, I think, someone whose morality does come across far more in the way he speaks, and that's been something I've found quite attractive in Brown. Even if I sometimes disagree with his solutions, that clear sense of like he's governed by a desire, for example, to lift children out of poverty. I mean, whether Blair, you're like, well, you just. Forgive me for this. Sometimes I think your main interest is making money.
Well, I think Blair could sell anything to anyone. In terms of his ability, that's not a jump on his route. But I mean, he's very gifted at kind of getting people on side and thinking how good he is.
Bit slippery, isn't it? Reminds me of the father of lies.
Wow, that escalated. Very quickly. We've gone from Blair to Satan in one sentence.
Well, only in the sense that yes, no, sorry, forgive me, that was a major escalation. I just thought I'd try it out live on the podcast recording. No, I suppose more. There's something a bit sometimes oily and salesman-like, isn't there, about Blair that I find uncomfortable.
Excellent,
yes.
Great. We're now in
agreement. Walked it back, phew. But anyway, yes. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about social media.
Let's do it.
That's the worst segue anyway. Is that all right?
That's absolutely fine.
I've been kind of mulling this because basically where we're at is Keir Starmer seems to be in that place that prime ministers who are on their way out get to, where they suddenly are like, right, I'm going to get as much done as I can before I have to give up the keys. And suddenly there's an expectation that with the consultation just closing on a social media ban, there's an expectation that Starmer himself will front the government's proposals, and he'll do so before the Macclesfield by-election on the 18th of June. So within weeks, we could expect him up in the House of Commons explaining, this is what we, the government, are going to do about this. So social media ban, yay or nay?
Yay with caveats.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the difficulty with presenting something as a binary choice is it doesn't leave much room for nuance, does it?
No.
I think we are absolutely at the point where something has to be done to regulate social media usage for children and teenagers. And I thought the intervention from doctors this week was fascinating, comparing it to smoking. I saw that was something which Wes Streeting himself had also picked up on, that kind of language. And it's interesting, we've got colleagues of ours who are parents and they are very in favour of some sort of ban. I guess complete bans are a pretty blunt instrument, aren't they?
Yes.
And they also don't leave someone very well equipped for when they hit, say, their 18th birthday. And they are then free to go and run free in the Wild West. So a complete ban I'm not sure is necessarily the right solution, but I think certainly much heavier regulation or banning certain features. So I was reading about sort of potential banning of infinite scroll or having a curfew. Things like that I think I would be very in favour of. I guess one of the questions is, what do we mean by social media? Are we talking about Instagram, Snapchat? Or are we actually talking about YouTube as well? I mean, that would feel like a very, very strong step to take. So, yes, I am broadly in favour. I'm certainly in favour of banning certain features. But I think a blanket ban doesn't necessarily set people up for the real world once they become adults.
Yeah, interesting.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I maybe just helpful to say, I don't think there is a definitive Christian position on this, which all I mean by that is I don't think you can say that a social media ban is the only Christian answer to the problem.
Certainly.
And so there's a lot of freedom here as we look to apply some biblical principles. My starting point is Genesis 1, Genesis 2, family. God gives the primary responsibility to raising children to parents. Therefore, parents, we want to listen to them, and what many of them are saying is that this is a huge problem. interestingly, I think the government have some plans, or at least it was recommended by the Select Committee on Education, that the government need to publish guidance for parents as to how they can best help their teenagers especially, and work with schools to make sure that digital education piece is as strong as possible.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think that's really important. I agree with you. I think a blanket ban is the wrong approach because I think it is too blunt an instrument. And I think there is a risk that it will push children to platforms that are not regulated properly, that are even more dangerous. And so I think it is more effective. I like what you said about raising children for the real world. I mean, Proverbs 22:6, train a child the way they should go. And so I think there is a responsibility here to equip children to live well in a digital world, because that fact of life isn't changing. I mean, you see all this stuff being pumped out on the internet around, detoxing childhood and de-digitalizing childhood. In one sense, the genie's out the bottle. So it's now, how do we live with it wisely and well? So I worry as well. I think Dan, our colleague Dan, wrote this in his piece, which is in a Friday opinion piece. It's Dan's opinion, not Care's opinion. But it's on. He comes out against the social media ban. Very reasonable, very wise piece. But one of the things he talks about is just that tilting of balance slightly away from parents, more toward the state if you do a ban. And I'm instinctively always uncomfortable with that movement. I think there's been too much of that movement. And I make parenthood great again is kind of what I want to say.
Well, I think there's absolutely.
You didn't expect a Trump line there, did you?
No, you're quite right.
I've mentioned the devil. I've mentioned Trump. Oh gosh, now I'm making another comparison. Yes, carry on.
I think to stop. No, I think that's a fair thing to be concerned about, and I am always nervous when the message which we're essentially sending is that the state knows how to parent children better than parents do.
Yes.
I think that's something I'm pretty uncomfortable with. Having said that, I guess there are two realities which I think we have to recognise. One is that the parents today are having to deal with very different problems from parents throughout the vast majority of human history. And this is also an area in which new platforms are released all the time, and new features of them are brought out. And it's not necessarily easy for parents to kind of keep on top of all the digital trends which are going on. Because this isn't what they were used to. And you think about the two of us. I mean, you've got a child. I don't yet. But the social media platforms which we would have been aware of growing up are not the same ones young people are on today.
Bebo, anyone?
Indeed. Like, we are from a different generation. And so
MSN Messenger.
Well, we were chatting about MSN actually in our office upstairs earlier. So some of the principles might be the same, but for us to stay on top of all the ins and outs, that's not easy.
No.
And then I think that the second reality, sadly, is that although lots of parents will take their responsibilities really seriously, there will be some who, for whatever reason, like they don't have time or they don't understand, or there will be some parents for whom they do not live out their responsibilities. And so what are we providing for those children?
I think that's right. And I also think that it is where, as with so many things in the Christian life, thank goodness for the church community, which on the one hand can be difficult because other Christian parents will do different things from what you will. Just learn to live with that. That's never going to change. We actually don't want uniformity when it comes to parenting too much, because your child is your child. They're different from... But equally, it's a space where you can talk together about these things. And I sometimes, I sometimes worry that there are parents out there who are desperate for help and don't have anyone that they can turn to. And you imagine the kind of stress of raising a teenager today when they've got a smartphone, and it's the peer pressure from schools. And so however we address this, it must be a partnership with parents respected, schools involved, government need to produce good guidance. And what I would say is anything that brings social media companies into line and regulates them more heavily, I'd be in favor of, because I think they've shown a real callous disregard for the protection of children. And I think that's something that actually from a Christian perspective is the classic example of like a big power abusing its responsibility in order to make money. And that's wrong.
Indeed. Whoever leads one of these little ones to stumble.
Exactly.
It's also worth saying, I think I'm right in saying, certainly our Church and Government Officer for Northern Ireland offers this talk. I don't know whether the other two do as well.
Yes, no, they do, yes.
So our Church and Government team offer a talk on parenting in a digital age.
They do.
So if that is something which you think would be useful for your church, then do get in contact via the website.
Absolutely. And actually, in addition, care.org.uk, our topic section, you can go down, although it's called pornography, it actually has some resources around wider online safety. And so well worth having a look at that as well. But yeah. Right, final item. We're going to go to my homeland.
Indeed.
And I've got something for you, actually, Peter.
It took me a moment to realise why these were down here.
There we go. Now, I enjoy co-hosting the Engage podcast with you so much that I've actually got you a present.
Oh, thank you.
This one costs £3,000 and this one costs £3,500.
Yeah.
This one came with the pepper. This one I've put some salt in. I got this salt from one of the mountains in the Alps, and that cost £6,000 because I had to pay for it to be specially couriered via a special private jet just for you. So in total, I've spent in the region of £10,000 on these, and I want you to know I use care money to do so.
So what's going to happen with the donors? That's the question.
Well, that is the question. Now,
we should explain this, should we not?
Yes, very quickly.
None of this is true.
Yes. However, this is a metaphor, if you like, for a story that's emerged in Scotland where Peter Morrell, who is the former husband of Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister and leader of the Scottish National Party, Peter Morrell, from 2001 to 2023, was the chief executive of the SNP, a very senior and significant role. And it turns out that Mr. Morrell has been embezzling SNP funds, as in money given by individual donors, whatever else, husband and wives, other groups. That money, sometimes very small amounts, sometimes very big donations, was given to the SNP, and he has been using it to purchase a wide range of items. I mean, the story and the list is astonishing. What do you make of this? I'm going to give some highlights from what he spent the money on, but just briefly, what do you make of this story?
Oh, gosh. I mean, it's pretty spectacular. It's worth saying that the full amount, I think, is about £400,000.
Yes.
So it is not insignificant. I will let you read out your list in a moment rather than giving any spoilers away. I guess when you read something like this, you completely understand why voters feel such little confidence in politicians or talk about things like they're all in it for themselves, or the kind of that idea of a breakdown in trust between the electorate and those in office. You completely get it. Obviously, when you are given any position of responsibility, or when you're given any sort of particular financial gifts, you want to steward those well and wisely. And so this is the very opposite of that, where someone has taken something which was given for a very particular purpose.
Absolutely.
And then has taken it for themselves.
And breaks at least 2 commandments, maybe actually 3. Breaks the coveting commandment. I think there's coveting here. Breaks the stealing commandment and breaks the lying commandment, because this is deception.
Indeed.
Now, I think it's also worth just saying that this particular story has been bubbling away for a while.
Yeah.
And I saw a very helpful thread on social media that just pointed out that what's happening is there's actually 2 financial irregularity stories about the SNP, and they've become mixed. The first is there was money that was ring-fenced towards a second independence referendum.
Indeed, yeah.
That money, around £428,000, something like that, we now know from the accounts of the SNP, according to what I read on social media, seems to have been spent on the 2017 general election. In other words, it was raided because they didn't have enough money otherwise. That then led to a sort of a collective agreement to sort of smooth that over, cover that up, hide that away. And the point this individual was making was, if you track when Morrell was mostly spending this money, the 450,000, it coincided with a massive spike around the time that this cover-up of the other stuff was happening. In other words, it was timed deliberately while the cover-up was taking place. Now, I don't know if that is completely true. It was just one thread I read, but it just reminded me there's another angle on this. Just some examples. Nearly 125,000 on a Niesman and Biscoff motorhome, which he deliberately parked on his mother's driveway, and he created fake invoices for that. He then spent 57,500 towards an 81,000 pounds on a Jaguar I-Pace, which is a very posh SUV. He spent nearly 10,000 on 2 Bremont watches. He spent nearly 6,000 on several Mont Blanc fountain pens, and they're top of the range. I mean, I love a fountain pen, but like I use V-Pilot, and they cost about 10 quid for 5. So there we go. He spent £650 on Fortnum and Mason on 2 of its feasting advent calendars. I mean, that's extraordinary. He spent £160 on the Folio Society's edition of Hannah Ardent's The Origins of Totalitarianism. He also spent just over 3,000 on a Husqvarna robotic lawnmower.
Oh, wow.
I know. And so Nicola Sturgeon, her defense is, it wasn't me, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. So she was married to the guy for a considerable amount of time.
Yeah.
Are you honestly expecting us to believe that you were not suspicious at all?
Yeah.
It is extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah. It's difficult to know, isn't it? In that I completely understand that the demands of people who are in high office are such that they may not have the time at home, which most of us do. They may not have quite the same time to invest in their marriage as the rest of us do. But you would also, I think most of us would question quite where £125,000 motorhome had come from. And I also think it does provide a pretty sorry commentary on someone's marriage.
Yes.
If those kind of conversations are not taking place.
Yes.
So I mean, I don't want to prejudge or assign guilt, but yeah, but it certainly tells us a story about someone's marriage.
Yes.
If either they don't notice or they don't ask questions.
Yes.
Around some of these things.
You know, I couldn't help when I've read the story about think of, you know, the biblical examples, so many verses about the love of money. For example, 1 Timothy 6 being the root of all kinds of evil. Yeah. That's been proven here. Lots of proverbs about, you know, not loving money and being careful with it, being a good steward of it, etc. But also you think of examples of, like, say, Judas, probably the money man of the disciples, and maybe a sense there is some financial irregularity. And then also Ananias and Sapphira. And the very, very scary account of them keeping some money back and pretending they were laying it at the feet of the apostles. And all this to say, I mean, the Bible's got a very, very strict view around you've got to really guard against love of money. And so I think it's a warning to us all. I mean, that's an application for me from this is it's easy to think, oh, that's just him. But I mean, the same possibility can lie in my heart if I'm not careful. Because heck, I'd love a Mont Blanc fountain pen.
Well, yeah, and that was one of the things which I was reading in response to the story, was effectively the take was he saw a chance to fund the lifestyle which he couldn't otherwise have.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I guess, as you say, we all have to watch our hearts. The other thing too is we've got to hope that someone is genuinely remorseful and repentant. Yes. And you look at, say, the story of when Jesus meets Zacchaeus, who has been cheating people for years and years, and he comes to the point where he comes to know Jesus and says, well, look, if I've cheated anyone, then I'll pay them back. Is it 4 times as much? Yeah. And that's the kind of repentance which we always want to see. So there is always a way back. But yeah, absolutely, it is a pretty sobering story of the temptations which can come with great power.
And you put it next to Tony Blair's intervention and his diagnosis of the problems we're facing as a country. And you have to say, at the moment, politics is not in a happy or particularly healthy place. And I think this is a call for the church. I think it's about saying, you know, men and women and young people in churches, think about whether God is calling you into politics, because that's the way we're going to see change. I mean, you know, hopefully we'll see change through God's common grace and through the raising up of more decent-hearted people. There's plenty of them in politics, praise God. But what we want to see people shining a light for Jesus in the places of power.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, completely. I remember something which Ross said, our CEO said, back when we were doing a film a few years ago.
Yes.
And I was asking him some questions about the leadership program.
Yes.
And he talked about the vision of the leadership program being a vehicle to raise up leaders of integrity and character.
Yes.
Which is absolutely what we need. But if there are people who are listening in on this who think this could be for them and they are sort of at the start of their careers or they might be studying, then do investigate the Care Leadership Program, which gives you a great foundation.
Yes.
To get a bit of a feel for politics, get some great Christian teaching, both on theology, but also around leadership as well.
Absolutely.
And puts you in contact with some great people.
Yeah.
So that might be worth investigating for some people.
Definitely. Well, that then brings us to the end of this particular podcast. Peter, as ever, thank you very, very much. And can I just encourage you once again, please, if you would like to come and join us on Tuesday, the 17th of November, 2026, from 7 to 9 p.m, St. James the Lesser Church, Pimlico, where Peter and I will be hosting Engage podcast live recording with special guests on the rise and subject of Christian nationalism. Head to care.org.uk/engage live. Book your tickets, just £5. We'd love to see you there. Until next time, my friend, every blessing. See you soon.
Indeed. Take care.